Hey everybody, I hope you're doing well during this time of COVID, during the time of the Korah. Um, this is the video for the week of next week, the week of March 30th. Um, this week's going to be a little different than last week. Last week was just Citizen and some discussion posts, getting us back into the groove. I hope you like Citizen. This is before the second, I'm recording this before the second post is due. But so far it seems people are liking it. It's a bit of like a difficult work in terms of topic and stuff like that, but it's really well written. I wouldn't give y'all something that was badly written unless we were talking about what not to do. But it mixes prose and essay, and art, and really, it looks effortless, but it's in such an interesting, powerful way. It's definitely worth reading. And prose poetry is just cool, so yeah. But yeah, I hope y'all are liking that. I'm sending out an announcement once it's more reasonable hours. But I accidentally taped a 2 instead of a 1 for the due date for the first discussion post. The first discussion post is due Wednesday, the 25th, March 25th at midnight. And so if it counted as later, you got a notification. It's no big deal. I just taped a 2 instead of a 1. So I'm not a coder. Sometimes you put a 0 where there should be a 1 or vice versa. Bad things can happen. So, so this week's structured slightly differently. Sorry, I'm just like, the world's ending a little bit. It's 6 a.m. I'm in a suit, in my bedroom, by myself, talking about poems during the end of the world. And it's like, you know what? I don't know if I'd have it any other way. This isn't a bad way to meet. So, trading the tie I don't have. But this week is structured differently. It's just there's one assignment for each day. We're doing asynchronous learning, so days aren't real. We're losing the concept of time. Do try to see the sun every once in a while, it helps. But we're just doing 3 assignments. We're doing the haiku, the villanelle, and the sonnet as a ramp up into our vocabulary unit. Basically, 2 weeks? 3 weeks from now? I don't know. But, let me check the date. April 10th, maybe. April 17th. Is where there's going to be a vocabulary test. It's mostly going to be, there's going to be some matching, but it's mostly going to be fill in the blank, or just, like, short answer. The question is going to be, like, what's a villanelle? And you'll just have to tell me. So, pretty simple. But so we're going to be looking at lots of vocabulary words and stuff like that. We're going to be keeping, like, a word bank. Anytime you see bolded words in the lessons, it'll be like, oh, that's a vocab word, that's probably going to show up on the test, so just keep an eye up for that. Try to keep like a glossary going, like a personal glossary for you, just in a notebook or like in a new Word document. Like when you see a bolded word, look for a definition of it, define it. In the back of 250 poems, there's the glossary, which is pretty much like what I'll be using. If it's a term that's not in the glossary, or it might be a slightly different term, like sometimes, like I'll say fixed form, where I think in the book it says closed form, and that's just slightly different terminology, so stuff like that, but don't sweat too much about it. Like, it's important to know these rhetorical terms and devices and be able to use them, but I'm not going to be trying to be like, oh, do you remember the eighth Sajiki from that list I gave you that like we didn't super talk about? I'm not trying to do that. But yeah. So I'm going to get into the lesson for today, which is just going to be about haikus. The villanelles and the sonnets will be their own video. This is just like the intro to the week and also haikus. The thing is about haikus is that, and this is like a poetry teacher thing, is just that like they get spoiled a little bit because not often, really, not like actually often. And honestly, it's mostly like a high school or middle school thing. Probably is like the assignment will be like write a poem, and then someone will be like, oh, what if I wrote a haiku? Wow, and it's like ha 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 ha. But the haiku is actually so cool. The haiku started. There's another type of Japanese poem called a renka or a renga. Sorry if my pronunciation's off. I've tried to look it up, but I'm not. I'm not exactly trained in Japanese pronunciation. And the renga is a longer poem, usually collaborative. And what would happen is the haiku would be the first part of it, and then there would be the rest of the poem. But the haiku, it was also called a haku, like Hokku instead of Haiku, which is how we spell it today. It's been like that for a few centuries. I say today like it just happened. But the haiku was the first introductory part. But people ended up liking that so much, it was so important, it kind of became its own thing. And obviously, something that's big, and looking at the readings for today, we're only reading one Japanese haiku, which is the Old Pond by Basho. Yes. It's like the most famous haiku. I'm sure you've probably read it, but we're just going to talk about a bit of it. But then we're going to go straight into American haiku, namely Jack Kerouac. So the difference between Japanese and American haiku, and really, I talked about like open and closed forms earlier. A closed form is something like a sonnet or like a villanelle, where it's like you follow this rhyme scheme, you say this things these way, and they have to sound like this. It has a lot of sort of requirements to be in the form, and it's very strict. And then there's open forms, which is just like, have fun, just write a good poem, don't worry about it, and that exists in Japanese and the American haiku. Like in Japanese, you've heard like the 585, the 575. Like you're supposed to have that amount of syllables, and that's what makes it a haiku. But that's not really what makes it a haiku, because like Japanese haiku is written in Japanese, which is a very different language with a very different writing style. Just like method of transcription, it's not the Romanic alphabet. They don't even do 585 or 575 all the time, and it really doesn't translate well to English. The essence of the haiku is it's usually a poem about nature, almost always. And there's, haikus are short, but there's something in it that ties back to nature, or more specifically a season. This is called the kijo. It's just like the season word. In the Old Pond that we're going to read, the kijo is the frog. The frog is a spring or summer thing. It tells the reader that, oh, this is a spring or summer haiku. Just because that's where it kind of gets arbitrary. It's just a haiku thing. They're about natures, they're about seasons. They don't necessarily have to be, but that's like what makes a haiku, So I have the kijo listed, and then the way you figure out like what a kijo is or what it means is you look at lists called seijiki. So after the word kijo, I have like, look at the seijiki here, and it's pretty cool. I definitely recommend checking it out. I will warn you, the website for some reason has this like cyan blue, like very bright blue as the background. So if it's late or if your eyes are tired, just be aware, be warned. But so one of the aspects of haiku is the kijo, the season, the natural. One way or another, it should really be about nature. And the other is kiru, which is cutting. What that means is juxtaposition. Oh, there's Jasper. He's sneaking in. Hey, boy. I'm doing teaching. But so juxtaposition, which is just sort of the essence of it. It's such a small poem. You have these. Thanks, Jasper, for making a ruckus so late. I was worried I wasn't making enough noise. I guess it's actually very early. But so juxtaposition. Juxtaposition is just when you put two things next to each other that sort of set each other off, It's like complementary colors, colors that just go well together, flavors that go well together, like blueberry and lemon, Blueberry is like sweet, kind of earthy, mild, and mellow, and then lemon is like zesty and acidy, and they bring out the best qualities in each other. That's what you're going to want to do with the haiku, with the images. And you'll see a lot of juxtaposition in that. One of Kerouac's haikus, it's one of his more famous ones. It's like Winterfly dies in the medicine cabinet. Just nothing. And so you have like the fly, the nature, and then the medicine cabinet, and that's just the sharp juxtaposition, you know. In the old pond one that we're gonna build, there's the frog and the silence before, and then the jumping into the pond, so silence and sound, frog and pond, you know, that sort of thing. And it's really just like, you know, we're going to be writing a bunch of haikus today, so just do your best, really. You know, they don't have to be perfect. One thing about the juxtaposition is it's usually you have the two images. No, I'm sorry. I ramble, I meander, I talk in circles. The nice thing about a video is you can just rewind and just follow the convoluted thread of thought again. But they have kiriji, which is a cutting word. A lot of times how it's translated from Japanese poems is instead of like an actual syllable or sound how it would usually be, it'll be an ellipses, it'll be a dash, it'll be an exclamation point, which you'll see in the old pond translations that are linked, you know. So just keep an eye out for that. And that one specifically, it's the ya. Yeah. So to boil it down, when you're writing your haikus today and listening to and reading to the haikus today, think about something natural when you're doing them, and think about juxtaposition, and specifically have a moment in between the two things. Like if you're mentioning a tree and then a car, have a sharp moment in between the tree and the car. It can be an exclamation point, it can be its own word, it could be like the word crash or something like that if the car is crashing into the tree. But the essence of the haiku is natural and swift and like cutting. You know, this is a poem that you really want to like impact you. Yeah. Yep, so you'll just be turning in 10 haikus for today, for the purposes of Friday poems at the end of this week. That 10 haikus will count as one poem. Poem math. I don't make the rules, except I do. But yeah, I think that's about all I have for haikus. Oh, wait, I almost forgot. So I talked a little bit about the history of the haiku and how it came about, and I've mentioned the guy, the Matsuo Bosho. His story is so cool. He rose to fame by collaborating with another famous poet, eventually got into like the fancy courts and stuff like that, was doing all sorts of good things. But despite his success, he was unhappy. So he just like went on a walk one day and he didn't come back. And people recognized him because he was famous. They're like, oh, you're like the master poet. Like, I've read your book. It's called Shriveled Chestnuts was what his book was called. And they're like, it's great, I love it, like, can you teach me how to write better haikus? And he'd just be like, that book was trash, don't read it. And they're like, oh, okay, well, what should I do to be a better haiku person? He's like, don't care about what anyone else thinks. And I'm just like, it's funny, you know, history has a lot of cool stories. Yeah, I think that's really all I have to say about haikus today. The assignment is I have you write 5 with like sort of parameters to sort of break the idea of the 5-8-5, 3 lines sort of thing, and then you just write 5 that are purely your own, you know. There's also the reading. So the reading it's just a list of all of Jack Kerouac's haikus. They're listed alphabetically, which is a bit odd. But what you want to do is just pick 2 or 3 from each letter and just read it. Haikus are short, you can read them quickly, so like you can read 80 haikus in like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, you know. Also, Jack Kerouac also performed his haikus, and we actually have a really good album of them. Like history, we as a civilization have a really good album of them, where he'll just say a haiku, and then just like some saxophone impression. Maybe this is better. And he'll just like say a haiku, and there'll be some jazz, and then he'll say another haiku. That's really cool. I definitely say give that a listen. You know, it's not an either or thing, but they're both really good. So look at both of them if you have time. You know, but yeah, haikus. Oh, I'll grab Jasper so he can say goodbye. Oh, he's attacking me. Oh God. Hey, Jasper. Say hi to everybody. You look so happy to be here. Alright, bye everyone.